With the new Peter Jackson documentary, The Beatles Get Back.
Yeah, get back, George!
The man who set up the equipment for the Beatles' last live performance, the rooftop concert, was also the man who engineered Dark Side of the Moon. Up next, another interview with a genius music man on how he is always at the right place at the right time with the talent to take it to the next level when he's there. The interview is coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. It's always the story directly from the legends right here. Make sure that you subscribe below right now. Click the bell so that you never miss out on our daily content. Also, take a quick look at our offering on Patreon. I think you'll like it. We give you more content that helps this channel keep going, as does our merch below. You can get a Professor of Rock shirt. Let people know that you support Three Chords and the Truth. You know, it's always a treat to have Alan Parsons on this show. More than a treat, it's an honor. I mean, he's the genius that has engineered some of the greatest albums ever. Abbey Road, Let It Be, Dark Side of the Moon, just to name a few.
Taking away the moments that make up a dull day. All I need is the air that I breathe and to hear of the cat.
And of course, his amazing work with his own band, the Alan Parsons Project.
Sky, looking at you.
Up next, Alan tells us how that all came to be, how he ended up at Abbey Road Studios as a teenager. It's an amazing story. And how he ended up making those connections that made him one of the finest producers of the rock and roll era. So as we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. These things, I'll tell you what, the thing about Zenni, it's easy, it's cost-effective, and first class. If you go to Zenni.com right now, you can experience it yourself. You pick the color, the shape, the size. You see how you look before you buy. There's so many features to add to it. I love Zenni. Check it out at Zenni.com. Here's Alan. What was it for you, whether it was a song, an album, even something you heard on the radio and a concert that kicked open the door to your mind and made you want to pursue music? Do you remember a moment?
I remember certainly wanting to be in music at a very early age. I mean, right from the time that I was playing piano and guitar and flute, you know, as a child. But I think it was probably Sgt. Pepper that finally convinced me that I wanted to work in a recording studio. That was the moment that inspired me to seek out a job at Abbey Road Studios. And I was just very, very lucky. I just managed to apply for a job with the boss at Abbey Road at the right time. I was working in a associated department of EMI in West London. It was called Tape Records. We were making reel-to-reel, you know, on little plastic spools, making albums on little 3-inch plastic spools, and you know, of all the commercially available stuff at the time. So there was a link to Abbey Road, and so I got the interview, and then 2 weeks later I was working there.
That's an incredible story to be able to be inspired by Sgt. Pepper. And then just a few years later, I mean, you were assistant engineering the Beatles' last 2 albums. That's quite an origin story. Every superhero has an origin story.
I don't take any credit for anything creative on those albums. I was in training and, you know, just learning the ropes from I mean, really good people to learn the ropes from. The Beatles, George Martin, Jeff Emmerich, the engineer, and so on. But no, I was a very junior guy, you know, just learning at that point.
But even to be a fly on the wall in the making of those records.
It was extraordinary, yeah, it really was.
That's what we were also talking about before, the appreciation that goes into an album. And that's what's been so great about not only your contributions with Pink Floyd, but also Alan Parsons Project. When you pick up that record and you're looking at it, the mystery that is there, because it starts with seeing the cover of the album, ingraining yourself into the music and putting the vinyl on and listening to each song and how each piece of music intersperses into the next and what it means. Take me through Let It Be, because a lot of people misunderstand that Let It Be is not the Beatles' final album. Abbey Road was. Let It Be was the one that they did before that. It was released after. But take me through, like, give me some moments or some stories if you remember any from that.
I think Let It Be was an attempt to get away from the rather clinical, scientific approach to recording that they'd taken on Pepper and the White Album. I think Paul was leading the field on just saying we're going to do an album in a studio, but played live, no overdubs, just capture a performance. We are a band, so let's play like a band. I'm not sure if he had the general support of the others. You can kind of tell from the movie and from the still shots that nobody was really very happy. They're all pretty long-faced, But I think Paul was trying hard to drum up enthusiasm.
Well, let me ask you about Abbey Road, which is one of my favorite Beatles albums of all time. Tell us kind of about the interactions in that album.
Well, during the time that I was on the sessions, I didn't do the whole album, and in fact, the early stages, I came in the later stages. And during the time that I was there, they were very rarely together. They were just coming in as individuals to work on their own songs. They might appear at the beginning of the day to see if George Martin had any particular thoughts that any of them were needed for. But basically, it would be all day Paul McCartney, all day George Harrison, all day John Lennon, just as individuals. And Ringo came in and said, anybody need any help? And they said, no, thanks, Ringo, we're doing fine. And then you'd sort of walk away slightly dejected at the beginning of every day.
The kind of the writing was on the wall a little bit at that point.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I didn't know their characters well enough at that stage to really know what was going on. But it seemed that, it wasn't a band. It was a series of individual efforts.
Well, the Beatles' last gig, which happened on top of the roof there, were you there that day?
I was. In some of the pictures, you can see, I chose the worst place to be photographed. I was behind one of the cameras, so nobody was looking at me. But in some of the still shots, you can see me. I'm wearing a very smart striped jacket with an orange shirt and a thin black tie. I was there to, set mics and make sure nothing went wrong with the gear, because Glyn Johns and the recording gear was all down in the basement. I was just up on the roof I had a good seat.
Not only did you experience it, but I mean, that'd give you all-time bragging rights had you never done anything else in your life. To say, I set up the mics for the Beatles' last gig.
It's true.
They got shut down eventually.
Yep. The police eventually made it stop. But they'd got a few good takes in the can by the time that happened.
Get Back and a few of those great songs.
Everybody had a good time. Don't let me down.
So it wasn't really a gig. It was, they were perfectly aware that they were recording. So otherwise they wouldn't have played the same song more than once. But they probably did. I think they may have done three versions of Get Back on the Roof.
Get back to where you once belonged.
I want to also ask you about, after the Beatles, it must have been a good experience for not only you, but as well as Paul, because you also engineered a couple of his solo albums, Wildlife and Red Rose Speedway. You did a rough mix of I Am Your Singer that Paul really liked.
I am your singer.
That's a rare snippet, that one. Yes, I did. I was just asked to run off some mixes in the first engineer's absence, Tony Clark. And they said they couldn't fault the rough I'd done of I Am Your Singer, and that's the one that got used on
Made
the
the final mix.
Singing my love song to you.
So that paved the way for me getting the gig for Red Rose Speedway.
My love does it good.
Well, I wanted to ask you about some of your other records and great productions with the Hollies, for example, The Air That I Breathe.
All I need is the air that I breathe.
He Ain't Heavy, But He's My Brother, which was a real departure for them from their earlier stuff.
He ain't heavy.
Bus Stop and some of those great songs.
Every morning I will see her waiting at the stop.
He Ain't Heavy, that was fairly early days with the Hollies for me. I was a tape op, an assistant engineer still. But little known fact is Elton John played piano on that song.
He ain't heavy.
So that was interesting. I mean, his career was just beginning, his Elton John career. But he was known as Reg the piano player. But also, I did probably 3 or 4 albums with the Hollies.
Another night, Saturday night, and I'm blue.
And The Air That I Breathe was the big one for me.
Time. All I need is
A huge hit all over the world. And that was in my early days of engineering, so I was very proud of that.
Probably been asked this many times, but it's always a mystery. Does somebody know, like The Air That I Breathe, that was a hit song, or that you've got it when you've got it? Do you feel that?
The Hollies producer, Ron Richards, he was an incredible songsmith. I remember his reaction to both those songs at the time. He heard He Ain't Heavy, he said, "Oh my God, what a song." And he was right. It was, he just had this ability to hear a song and say, "This is going to be one of your biggest hits." I remember him using those words.
all I need is the air that I breathe.
And he was right on both those occasions.
Year of the Cat, which one of my favorite songs. I mean, I just love that song, and it's kind of interesting because I don't know if you've ever heard of the term yacht rock, where they're
Yacht rock.
Yeah, Hall & Oates.
She's gone, I paid the devil to.
And the Doobie Brothers,
I believe she's never gone away.
and Al Stewart is kind of thrown into that, the kind of the 70s soft rock thing.
Doesn't give you time for questions. As she locks up your
Tell me about producing that album, because Al was really more of a kind of had a folk thing, and you took him more to the jazz side with some of those records. Tell me about that.
I mean, it was I wouldn't say it was jazz. It was just we, for the first time, put a saxophone on one of his songs.
Phil Kenzie on the sax. He was watching a movie, didn't want to come down to the session. Tell me about that. That's
It's
funny.
true. We'd done everything. We'd reached a point where Alan wanted to put a sax on the record, which I really didn't want. I mean, it's not a folk rock instrument. I mean, I like the jangle stuff, the Byrds.
Hey, Mr. Tambourine.
Bob Dylan.
Times they are a-changing.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Just a poor boy, though my story is seldom told, I squandered.
He just sort of scratched his head and said, "Saxophone? I'm a folk, I'm meant to be a soft rock folk artist, not a jazzer,
Saxophone, what's that? You want a jazz record? I mean,
So he was a little surprised at the suggestion, but he allowed me to go through with it. And I called in Phil Kenzie, who was an old friend that I'd worked with on a number of my own records, other people's records.
called up Phil Kenzie, and Kenzie didn't want to come. He only lived around the corner. He said, I'm halfway through a movie. He said, if I can do it in 1 or 2 takes and see the end of the movie, I'll do it. But if it takes any longer than that, I'm just going to go home. Plays it in 2 takes, goes home and sees the rest of the movie, and that was that. And I said, I don't like this. It sounds like a wounded cow. Alan said, well, live with it and come back tomorrow and see what you think. So I slept on it. And I came back the next day, and I still, it just doesn't sound like folk rock to me. But it had some sort of eerie, there was an eeriness to it.
Mysterious.
As if it was coming out of a mist. It's like I'm standing next to a mountain range like here, and then this comes rolling down, rather like a sort of a small avalanche, peering out of maybe the sunrise or something. And, okay, all right, fine.
Yeah.
Leave it on the record.
And to cut a long story short, Phil Kenzie joined Al's band.
Yeah.
For the next album, and he was all over the next album, of course.
Yeah.
Time Passages.
And to end with I mean, what makes a great record?
I mean, we mentioned, songsmiths earlier. I mean, Ron Richards knew the hits of the Hollies before they were even recorded. Somebody else who was very good at that was Mickey Most, the late Mickey Most. He was a fantastic songsmith as well. I don't know. It all comes down to the song in the end, the way the songs work together. I mean, it can be beautifully engineered, beautifully produced, but if the song isn't right in the first place, what good is a great sound and a great production if the song doesn't make it? That's the basic rule. Get a good song and you've got a hit.
Hey, leave us a comment about the revered Alan Parsons. What are your favorite albums that he's created or worked on? Share your memories in your comments below. And finally, don't forget to subscribe. We'd love to have you be a part of this community. Patreon and merch are also calling your name. Help us keep this music alive. It's very important. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.